In this video, we will learn about how to define custom validation rules for our data models, data model objects. For this purpose, we will be creating a new model called, let's say, product. Okay. We will not be enabling the timestamps right now. We will just enable only the creation post methods for testing purposes. Let's start adding some fields to this one. The first field we will be adding is a product code. This will be a required field, and the second field will be material. This again will be required, and the possible options will be metal or plastic. Okay, so we basically created these two fields which are required fields, and that's it basically. And typically what happens is the following. I mean, in Altogic you can specify under the specific field properties, you can already specify some validation rules, default validation rules. For example, you can specify whether the product code will include letters, numbers, spaces, or special characters like the dot, comma, semicolon, column, something like that. Okay, so you can specify this kind of, let's say, validation rules here. Or you can specify the minimum length and the maximum length. Similarly, for integers and some other field types, you can define this kind of, let's say, validation rules. But sometimes you might need to define some additional things, right? Sometimes your let's say business logic is complex, and these default validation rules might not be able to handle your requirements. In that case, you need to define custom validation rules. But before proceeding further, let's do a small test. Let's create an entry for this object in the database. Okay, so let's say the product code will be M001 and the material will be metal. If you run this thing, everything is fine. It created in the database. Let's assume the following. Okay, let's go back to our model. Let's go to our product code and let's write down a custom validation. Let's say that our product codes can only start with M underscore and P underscore, like the metal or plastic. Okay, so the rule name will be product name validation. Okay, and the validation rule will be as follows. We will be using a text function called starts with. This basically checks whether a string starts with the character of a specified string. So starts with will be, we will be using the material product code, and whether it will be starting with M underscore for metals, or copy this thing, P for plastic ones. Okay, so this is like a shorthand for AND operator. I can write the same things like this. I mean, there's also another function, like if you know Excel, how to write formulas in Excel, you can do the same things similar like this. Okay, this is my first expression and this is my second expression. And if I combine them, basically this is equal to this. Those are the same things. Let me use this OR version. Okay. Okay. So if product name starts with underscore, M underscore or P underscore, we don't have any problem. But if this evaluates to false, okay, then we need to say that, hey, product name should start with M underscore or P underscore. Okay. So let's test this thing. In this case, let's put here T value, okay, which is not a defined one. Let's run this thing. Okay, the custom validation rule has identified the problem and say that, hey, the product name should start with M or P. Basically, evaluated this thing, this evaluated to false, and as a result, as an error message, it provided this error message, as you can see here. Okay, let's continue. Let's write another validation rule. Okay, the other validation rule will be whenever we specify M or P, the material type should also match. Okay, if for the product code I specify something starting with M, then the material should be metal. If it is P, then the material should be plastic. Okay, so product code and material should match. Okay, our validation rule will be as follows. So starts with, okay, if product code starts with m underscore, okay, and if the material provided is metal, we are fine. Let's put it in the parentheses, okay, or if the product name starts with P and if the material is plastic, we are also fine. Okay, so anything starting with M should also have a material type of metal. Anything starting with P should have a material type of plastic. Okay, so as a error message, product code and material type should match. Okay, let's configure this thing. Then let's go back here. Okay, so let's put something like here M, and I will put here plastic this time, which is a wrong case, right? Which needs to provide an error message. As you see, product code and material type should match. We had this error. Okay, let's put here test. Okay, product code and material type should match and no value type accepted value. I will do something like this, plastic, okay, and on top of that one I will put here T. Both of the two validation rules that's fair, like product name should start with M or P because it's starting with T, it's raised an error. And the second error is that since it is not starting with MP, I mean, then the second validation rule also failed and it also provided this error message. One feature of the validation rules is that you can say that, hey, if this validation rule evaluates to false and if I get this error message, do not continue, run the remaining validation rules. Okay, so if this fails, it will provide this error message. It will not execute the second, let's say, validation rule. Let's this again. In this case, sorry, here. In this case, if I go back to my test here, okay, it will run the first one. I should not be seeing the second validation error because I configured it as saying that, hey, if this thing fails, if there's an error with this one, do not continue executing the remaining validation rules. Okay, so that's all for now. Thanks a lot for watching.